Hello, it's Anavrin here from Gear in the Rear, bringing you a ZvZ replay, another one. Because the last one I brought to you was the one against Mutalis was kind of one-sided, and it wasn't exactly an optimal game to show off of strategy against a Mutalisk opening player. As people always like to say that in ZvZ you're forced into Muta versus Muta, and whoever has more wings wins, and whatever, but I strongly don't believe that. I haven't faced a player yet at my level, and I'm master level, um, that that really made me feel that I have to go mutas or I will fall behind regardless. And yep, I don't know how it is at the pro level. Pros also say that you are forced into muta versus muta, but I don't think many people have tried things other than Mutalisks, than going into Mutalisks, for them to say something that you're forced to go into Mutalisks. So in this game, I'm against a Zerg player on Star Station, I think, and I like Mutalisks in general as a unit, but I just don't like the CVZ matchup of Mutalisk versus Mutalisk because I always like to play a safe macro style, and against someone who does a very greedy macro style, who will just lose to like an early all-in, but still go straight greed, I can't really punish them if I go a safe macro style, and I'm forced to have to take a risk to really punish them. There's really no way for me to punish them without them reacting in time. Say like I scout them and they just went no spine crawler, one baneling nest, and like no lings, then I will like, oh, now time for me to punish him. I make 16 lings, which is 8 larvas worth, which is also 2 hatcheries of injects, because that's all I can afford, because I've been making drones the entire time. So by the time those 16 lings get to his base, he'll just have like 2 banelings, and then I can't really do anything. Obviously a little bit of micro from each side, but you get the idea. It's that you can't really punish people who do really greedy builds, who just take risks, and I really don't like that. I personally love mutas. I think in ZVT and ZVP they are great fun, and my style of play, which is going for queens, early queens and infestors, and delaying the hydralisks, or possibly not going hydralisk at all, you really am forced to play from like the Wings of Liberty style. Yes, the fungal is, the skill of landing fungal is harder, but it is not impossible. And even if you don't catch all the mutas, killing a large chunk of the mutas, or at least half the mutas, in a fungal or a chain fungal, is enough to turn the tide, as mutas are very costly. And I really don't like how people just play mutas versus mutas these days, although I like them in other matchups. If everyone was a cool guy and, you know, did safe macro styles, then maybe I would think differently, but as of yet, I haven't really thought any in any game that I've played so far, or any pro game that I've seen, I haven't been discouraged from not going Mutalisks. I've been experimenting with a lot of openings, and you really need to find the best opening for you in that specific situation. Like in Star Station, you have 3 relatively close bases, which allows you, if you don't go Mutalisk, to defend your third easier than another map, say like Neoplanet S. So I kind of want to go into this topic, is that you have to put yourself into a mind of, like, say like a Protoss player encountering a Zerg player who goes mutas. Okay, if you have a Protoss army that's 200 that is like just gateway units against someone who is like maxed out on lings and mutas or whatever. Well, obviously you don't have just gateway units, but say you have crowd controlling units like Colossus, which and like gateway units, it will actually just kill off someone who just went very light units that will die very easily. And it's the same way for Zerg, because Infestors do crowd control Lings actually a lot easier than Colossus, as Fungals like leave Lings at 1 health, and if you get Mutas in a clump, they actually just get Raffle stomped if they are chain fungled. Obviously, it is harder to land a fungal, as I think I said beforehand, but there's a little bit of mechanic involved that I will explain later into the game if I remember. So far in this game, the opening is relatively same, and that is why I chose this game. So I haven't done any really aggressive opening, as I'll keep allowing the replay to keep going while I explain this theory. Is that, say when you're playing a ZVP in Neoplanet S, the third base is really far away for the Protoss, and as opposed to a map like Akalon Wastes, Protoss can open up like a Stargate, maybe even 2 Stargates, and still take their third relatively easily because the map is just structured like that. So against a map like Neoplanet S, which has a third place in a really obscure spot, you gotta really ask yourself, well, how do Protoss play in that situation? Is that the Protoss usually does a really 2-base aggression style of play whilst they expand, or you know, like assuming they expand at all and not just, you know, just all in you. As I'll let this sort of Baneling fight go on, and it's not really although it might be exciting, it's not actually that exciting, as the whole point of this opening is to show that both Zerg players stay even. So in a map like Neoplanet S, if the Protoss player expands, they are still going to put an incredulous amount of pressure upon the Zerg player, because they need that distraction to get their third base up, and their attack can potentially destroy the Zerg, or their attack potentially just dies to the Zerg, but that's not really something that you should count on. You should sort of think, you should always think that both players micro the best they can, and if they do so, then it should go even at the end. Oh, I have to mute vents at the moment. And so what goes on is that on a planet like Neoplanet S, I wouldn't necessarily go a non-Muta style in ZvZ every single time, but I would probably do a lot of early aggression, like a Roach Baneling attack. Just make that all out, and then maybe all in them, or maybe just, or usually just drone really hard behind it, because I want to slow down their economy. And the whole point of that is I can take my third because I slowed down their economy, so then they can't really attack me because their units are engaging my units. So you're sort of trading off units. You're keeping units in the lower amounts. And that's actually good, because my style of play is centered around queens and some little bits of roaches and infestors. So they're actually all very tanky units compared to, like, say, a pack of zerglings versus a couple roaches and queens. The roaches and queens are going to win, and the best part about it is that they're going to lose zerglings, whereas your units are merely damaged, and they'll start healing as well. So what happens is that in this game, I scouted the 2 gases that my opponent took, and I scouted the 3 spine crawlers, as you can see, and I saw that they had the layer finished. So as you can see, my opponent's spire is 64 out of 100, so that's 36 seconds until completion, and my infestation pit is around 34 seconds until completion. But you have to remember that infestors take 80 seconds after the infestation pit to come out with their pathogen glands, as pathogen glands does take 80 seconds and infestors take 50. So you just take it as 80. So my infestors will come out, you know, around 80 seconds plus another 34, which is like 2 minutes, and my opponent has half a minute remaining on his spire approximately, and another half a minute on his mutas. So my infestors with energy will come out approximately around 20 seconds after his mutas pop out, And if you really think about it, the travel distance between these two bases included in the calculation, like my infestors will pop out pretty much the same time his mutas reach my base. So that's not actually bad at all. I won't take any economic damage if I have spores placed in the right place. And spores in Heart of the Swarm are buffed. They do 30 damage versus biological units, i.e. mutas. I think the only flying biological unit are like, well, Zerg units. So, yeah. So, it shouldn't take too much stress. And as soon as you scout that they are going mutas, what I do is I just throw down queens right away. I like to go down 2 more queens before I get burrow, as you need burrow for your infestors, so then they don't get picked off. It's very crucial. You can't really skip it, I don't think so. And once you mass up your queens, you can get your creep spread out to your third. I really should have started... I've been really contemplating if I should rather get like a quick third queen, as you see a link counterattack. A quick third queen to spread creep to your third regardless. But for this game, I didn't. But I could see definitely how a third earlier queen could help. So really, our economies aren't actually that different. My third is actually complete quicker because I put pressure upon my opponent's third base. With what units? Lings and banelings, same as my opponent, who went early for gas, quicker than my gas, which means he's mining more gas than me, but I'm mining more minerals than him, or them. I keep, like, saying him as, like, it's very a sexist comment, but I'm trying to get out of it. But I'm mining more minerals, which allows me to afford more queens. But I don't need that much gas compared to my opponent if I go infestors. Like 4 infestors with pathogen glands are cheaper than like 10 mutas. So in the end, you don't really need that much gas compared to your opponent. And you can use a mineral surplus to create more queens. And the opening around denying your third base or putting on aggression before the layer tech infestors or mutas come out are just lings and banelings regardless if you are opening roaches in the late game, because you still are allowed to put on aggression against your opponent, and you'll probably, or you should at least, have more units than your opponent because they are saving money and gas for mutalisks, or minerals and gas for mutalisks, whereas you are just churning away because you can build infestors out piecemeal. You don't have to get a clump of mutas right away, whereas muta harass, you need them all at the same time, like as quick as you can. So I think this style is definitely viable. The thing you have to watch out for is if you mass out queens and you start moving them around, you need to inject them, and that's something I've been struggling on personally. But that's easily fixable. You can just because I tend to hotkey my hatcheries instead of my queens, and I usually inject, I hotkey my queens. So you have to make sure the queen's always nearby a nearby hatchery anyways, and the spore crawlers don't really cost that much money. As in a muta versus muta fight, people go spore crawlers as well, so that's not really different when you're considering a build like mine. Since you're making queens and lings, which are all mineral units to harass each other, you don't really need to use any gas for anything except burrow and infestors. So as this game goes on, we're actually pretty even in loss tab. I'm barely ahead by like 170 minerals, and we are both sort of 2 base saturated. I have 2 base saturated, he's 2 base saturated. He has 46 drones, I have 44. It doesn't really matter. But what does matter is that our unit composition in the late game. And a thing that you should also do is get 1 Evo chamber really quickly and start upgrading. But I have neglected to do that just because I just forgot, honestly. And you should always put your Evo chambers and buildings like at your natural choke. So if I had an Evo chamber here quicker, which I will place down, I can just eat and put a spine crawler here, then I'll just have little slivers where I can put my queen there so I don't get ling flooded. Because that's usually what happens in muta versus muta, is that people flood lings into each other's base hoping to kill as many drones as they can, or gas drones, or gas or whatever, so then they have less economy. So anyways, in this map, it is relatively close, so I can move my queens here, and he's targeting my Spore because, well, Spores really destroy Mutalisks. They really destroy Mutalisks. As you can see, I didn't even transfuse it until after he engaged, and he only has like 7 Mutalisks, and he couldn't even fight that with my queens there, and it's just really hard for him to do so. So he sends Lings and Mutas as Muta players in ZvZ do, and I have queens, and they are positioned around the mineral patches. I have literally 3 roaches, and my infestors just popped as his Mutas came. Obviously, as I explained earlier, my infestors could have been out the same time as Mutas came to my base, but I wasn't macroing right. But obviously, you can work towards that, and it is solvable. And things like this, where my infestors just pop out and he's attacking my stuff like this, like look, I just fungal him. Lings are easily fungable, and they just literally die. And my units, my small army of like 5 queens and 4 roaches, are just damaged a little bit, and they can heal each other, whereas he is actually losing units. I'm actually losing a lot of units because I'm sending the rest of my Lings to counterattack his third base, so he has to force. I forced his Mutas to go back and defend while I macro up. And since this map is pretty small, the bases are pretty close, and these rush distances are pretty close compared to some of the other maps. I decided to go for a macro style of Roach, Hydra, Queen, and Fester. And obviously if I had upgrades going quicker, then they obviously would have been better. But he's stuck on Lings and Mutas, and here's where you people usually transition into something more viable like Roaches and Hydras. And yeah, and if they go Roaches and Hydras, my infestors will be just dominating Roaches and Hydras, just like in Wings of Liberty. And if he decides to go for infestors, well, my infestors already have like full energy by the time his infestors pop out, so I will have more fungals at my disposal. So really, I'm really far ahead if I don't lose a base. Okay, if I lose the third base, then I am actually ridiculously far behind, and I am forced to do like a 2-base all-in, which is the same thing in Wings of Liberty. So nothing really changes. So the only thing left to really say before I go on with the rest of the ending of this game, which I have the timer here. I don't really care about like the games themselves, but I'm more interested in the mechanics of the actual games. So the last thing I want to talk about before I finish this game is that fungling Mutas are harder in HotS than in Wings of Liberty, because fungal is now projectile, right? Well, why did I say right if you guys can't answer me? Since they're projectile, the fungal range is actually buffed to 10 range. Okay, so the maximum range you can fungal a Mutalisk is at 10 range. Obviously, it is ridiculously hard to fungal a Muta at 10 range, as it can easily just fly 1 centimeter away and you'll miss your fungal. But you have to remember that the attack range of Mutalisks are 4. Okay, so they can't even touch your infestors or your army unless they go all the way to you at a range of 4 or less. And by that time, you can hit fungals, because from that range of 4 or less to a range of 10, you have a 6 range leeway, or 6 range window to hit your fungals. And you don't have to hit all the Mutas. You can hit a big chunk of the Mutas. Obviously, you shouldn't waste your fungals on 2 or 3 Mutas, because when you fungal, you have to chain fungal. If you don't chain fungal, they'll fly away and they'll just regenerate health. But if you can chain fungal half of their Mutas, that's like 500 gas, 500 minerals, like say of 5 Mutas out of 10 Mutas, or like say they have a pack of 20 Mutas and they have 10 Mutas that you fungled and you kill. That's 1,000 minerals and 1,000 gas, and all you've traded for that is maybe like energy and maybe like 1 or 2 queens if you somehow manage to let them die. you've efficiently traded pure energy for actual resources. And when a player goes from your mutas and lings, they don't have energy. Energy is not a resource to them. But for me, for queens and infestors, they are a resource, and they are essentially free if time was allowed to go on whenever. So I have a very deadly Roach Hydra force after going on that giant rant, and it's actually just 1-0 right now. It's 16 minutes, and honestly, if I had an Evo Chamber a lot earlier, then I could have been 2-1, but that's just me being lazy, and I don't want anyone to be discouraged from going this style just because it might not seem good in this game. I'm sure if a pro executed it, I'm sure it'd be more than viable, unless they somehow proved me wrong, which I'm totally willing to accept. I just don't like going mutas versus mutas in ZvZ due to the earlier reasons. So my opponent is going roaches. Sure, whatever. Yep. And they have units like mutas, lings, and roaches. And I have queens, hydras, and infestors. And I am maxed, and I am only on 3 base. If this game was more even, which I knew it wasn't even because I repeatedly kill chunks of his army throughout the game and minimize his army to a lower count. So it doesn't really, like, my units are just stronger, simply stronger than his or theirs. So if this was a more even game, sure, I'd take an expansion. Sure, I'd, do whatever. But for all intents and purposes, I'm just going to, pull the plug on his stupid muta play. So, as we go on with this game, it's going to be roaches, hydras, and queens and infestors versus a mutaless player who usually they go double upgrade roaches, but since this game's kind of funky anyways. Look, he's counterattacking me with mutas, and that's just my fault because I didn't have 2 spores in my main. I only had 1, and whatever. He has like a bunch of mutas here. He knows that these mutas can't do anything against my units, and look, they have mutas here, and for him to go to attack me to defend against my push, he has to come in, and when he comes in, I can easily fungal these units. And easily, even if it's a projectile, I can transfuse, I fungal, transfuse, fungal. My units are just more and more and more cost efficient, all because of energy. And it's not just energy on infestors, it's energy on queens. The more queens, the more infestors I have, the more energy I generate over time. Whereas his mutalists, the only thing that they can generate over time is regenerating their health if they lose health. But it doesn't matter because a full health mutalisk Lang Roach army against a Roach Hydra Queen army is vastly bad. I don't want to use any other word. I just want to say bad because they will die, and they will die quick. Just as a Protoss army kills a Zerg army when they have Colossus, the Zerg units just die quick, and this is the same principle going on here. So, yeah, I'm making 14 roaches, so I essentially only lost like 24 supply of units, but you have to remember like half of that supply was actually just drones from my main, so it doesn't really count actually. Yeah, as you killed 12 drones there. So, this game is pretty much over. I hope you've learned something. I hope stubborn people who keep thinking that Zerg players are forced into mutas versus mutalists have their opinions changed, because I have proved in this game at my level of masters, so I'm just saying that masters and below are totally viable into going non-muta for ZvZ. I am proving that at this level and under, you don't have to go mutalisks in a Zerg versus Zerg, because it is unreliable and it is actually worse than a stronger army. Obviously, this is only just one game, and if I play like I don't know, as I play more games and more games, and I find out that I have to go mutas, obviously I'll change my opinion, and I'll post about it. But until then, I will keep going this style. And you have to remember, this is Star Station. This is a relatively close map. So, in a map like Neoplanet S, or like really open maps like even like Belshir Vestige, even though your third is really close to you, you just have to get your defenses set up as tight as possible if you want to do the strategy, or you can just go like an all-in, or you can go like a Nidus Worm to sort of transport your queens. And the great thing about this style is it's not going for this ultimate composition as Protoss have to do. Like, they don't have to go gateway units, sentries, and Colossus, and like Void Rays. Sure, that's all great, but I can attack whenever I want in the stage after I establish some queens. Say I'm off of 3 base and we both of us are just starting off on 3 base, and I'm just starting off making like queens to defend against his mutas, and I decide that, oh, his defense is really weak. I can just go and attack with roaches and queens if my creep spread is okay, or I can just get Overlord speed and move my entire army out using like an Overlord creep highway. I can attack using roaches and queens if I want to time it with like an upgrade timing. I can attack with roaches, queens, and infestors. I can attack with roaches, queens, infestors, and hydras. My army just keeps evolving over time, and the efficiency of my army is much higher than the evolution of my opponent's army, which is Lings and Mutas, or into Ling Banes and Mutas, into Ling Bane Roaches and Mutas, into Ling Bane Roaches, Mutas, and like Hydralisks or Infestors. But by that time, my army will be superior if I have been keeping at least even with my opponent, if not already better. So hopefully you learned something, and I think I said that already. And this wasn't really a cast of a game, but it was using the game as proof to do a theory. So hope you enjoyed it, and I'll see you guys next. Wait, no, I can't say that. Until next time, that's what I say, right? All right.